The moment I walked into my boss's wedding, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. Everyone around me was dressed in silk, diamonds, and perfectly pressed suits, while I stood near the entrance in the only dark blue suit I owned, holding a small gift and wondering how long I could stay without being noticed. Then a young woman stepped out from behind a floral arrangement, looked directly into my eyes, and whispered something that made my heart stop. She told me all about you. I had no idea what she meant. My boss, Elena, had never talked about me outside the office. At least, that was what I believed. And before that night ended, I would discover that the woman I thought had only ever seen me as an employee had been quietly watching over my life for years. Before we continue, if you believe people deserve second chances, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs a little hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Kidness Studio. Your support helps us bring more emotional stories about kindness, courage, and second chances. My name is Daniel, and for 6 years I had worked as an assistant at a small financial firm. Elena Carter was my boss. She was demanding, organized, and sometimes intimidating, but she was also fair. She never embarrassed employees in front of others, never took credit for someone else's work, and always seemed to notice when somebody was struggling. Still, I kept my distance. I was raising my 12-year-old daughter, Sophie, alone, and every month felt like a puzzle I was barely managing to solve. After my wife passed away several years earlier, I had stopped expecting life to surprise me with anything good. My world had become simple: work, home, Sophie, bills, and sleep. I didn't have time for dreams. Then Elena announced she was getting married. The office erupted with excitement. She invited everyone to her wedding, including me. I almost refused because I couldn't afford an expensive gift or the kind of clothes people usually wore to such an event. But Sophie insisted I go. She helped me choose my old blue suit and wrapped a simple wooden jewelry box she had made at school as a wedding gift. She told me that sometimes showing up mattered more than bringing something expensive. So I went. The wedding was beautiful. The garden was filled with white flowers, soft lights, and rows of elegant chairs. I stayed toward the back, hoping to congratulate Elena quietly and leave before anyone noticed me. But just as I was about to turn away, her younger sister, Mia, approached me. She was perhaps 27, with the same warm eyes as Elena but a much softer expression. She studied my face for a moment before saying that Elena had told her all about me. I nervously laughed and asked what she could possibly have said. Mia smiled sadly and told me Elena had described me as one of the strongest people she knew. I didn't know how to respond. Strong was not a word I had ever used for myself. I had felt exhausted for years. I had cried silently in the kitchen when bills piled up. I had sat beside Sophie at night pretending everything was fine when I wasn't sure how we would manage the following month. I had missed birthdays, celebrations, and opportunities because survival always came first. Strong people, I thought, didn't feel afraid all the time. Mia then told me something that completely changed the way I saw my boss. She said Elena had noticed everything. She knew I had once taken unpaid leave because Sophie was sick. She knew I had quietly turned down a promotion because the additional travel would have left Sophie alone too often. She knew that I regularly skipped lunch because I was saving money. Most importantly, she knew about the little wooden jewelry box Sophie had made, because apparently I had once mentioned it at work without realizing Elena had remembered. Then Mia reached into her purse and handed me a folded envelope. My name was written on it in Elena's handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a letter thanking me for being part of her life, not simply as an employee but as someone whose perseverance had inspired her. She wrote that she had watched me choose responsibility when nobody was applauding, kindness when I was tired, and patience when life had given me every reason to become bitter. But there was more. Elena had learned that the company was restructuring, and my position was at risk. She had spent months fighting to create a new role for me, one that would allow me to work fewer late evenings while keeping my salary stable. She had also arranged a scholarship opportunity for Sophie through a community foundation she supported. She hadn't told me because she didn't want me to feel indebted to her. I stood there surrounded by hundreds of people, yet suddenly felt completely alone with my emotions. I had spent years believing nobody noticed how hard I was trying. And now I realized someone had noticed every single day. When Elena finally saw me, she walked over still wearing her wedding dress. I thanked her, but she simply smiled and told me that I had already given her something more valuable than any wedding present, proof that good people could keep going even when life was unfair. She said she hoped I would stop measuring my worth by what I could provide and start remembering who I was beyond my responsibilities. A week later, I returned to work expecting nothing to change. But on my desk was an offer for the new position Elena had created. The hours were better, the responsibilities matched my experience, and for the first time in years, I could imagine having dinner with Sophie without checking the clock every 5 minutes. Months passed. Sophie received the scholarship and began talking excitedly about her future. I started saving again, not just for emergencies, but for small joys. On weekends, Sophie and I visited parks, watched old movies, and sometimes bought ice cream without calculating whether we could afford it. One evening, Sophie asked me why I seemed happier. I told her that sometimes you spend so long believing you're invisible that you forget how powerful it feels when someone finally sees you. And that was the lesson I carried with me from Elena's wedding. Sometimes the person standing quietly in the corner is fighting a battle nobody knows about. Sometimes kindness is not a grand gesture. Sometimes it is remembering someone's struggle, opening a door, or simply telling them that their efforts matter. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who may need encouragement, and subscribe to Kidness Studio. You never know whose life might be changed by a story about hope. And before the story ends, I want you to leave one special comment. Someone sees my struggle. Write it if you've ever worked hard in silence, helped others without recognition, or simply needed someone to believe in you. Because sometimes, the greatest gift isn't money, success, or applause. Sometimes, it is discovering that while you thought nobody was watching, someone was quietly believing in you all along.